Hi guys, welcome back to yet another fun DIY sailboat refitting video here aboard good old Athena. In case you're new to my channel, this lovely looking boat here behind me is Athena. She's a 1987 Warrior 38 that I am slap dab in the middle of refitting, the end goal being for my fiancée Ava and I to be able to move aboard in a year and a half. I've been told by people in the comment section here on YouTube that I should no longer refer to what I'm doing here aboard Athena as a somewhat extensive refit, and well, I guess they're right. A few weeks ago I tore out a big chunk of the interior here aboard the boat. Why tear out that perfectly fine interior? Well, the reason is right here. I've been referring to these as structural members, and I've got a video that shows you exactly what is wrong with these. Short version is, the core inside of them is plywood and some of that is wet and the rest is damp. Fortunately, thanks to a super awesome structural engineer that did some simulations, I have a plan for how to deal with the structural members. Hiding here inside what used to be the aft cabin and what will soon be a technical area / long-term storage, I've got most of the materials I'll need to reinforce the structural members. In theory, I think I'll need just a dab more epoxy than this C-Pack of West Systems 105, but this should certainly get me started. As you can see, I've opted to go for the 206 hardener, which is the slow hardener because of the size of the area I'm going to be working on. But that also means I am watching the weather forecast like a hawk, because for me to be able to use this hardener, the temperature does need to be above 15 degrees Celsius. Last but certainly not least, I've got some of West Systems foam rollers in here. These are awesome for applying epoxy because they're very thin in the foam, which means they don't hold a lot of epoxy. That is important when it comes to epoxy because the more epoxy you lump together, the quicker it kicks off, meaning the thin foam on these rollers gives you more working time. As you saw in the beginning of the video, I've already taken care of the bulk of the prep work, so I'm almost ready to start laying up glass. I do still need to remove this last little bit of the cabin sole and do a bit of sanding up on the sides of the hull. But today, I want to see if I can come up with some kind of template for the glass I'm going to be laying up over the structural members. Athena is pretty beamy, so there's a good amount of room in here, but it is still a little bit cramped for cutting glass. It would be easier for me if I could make a template, bring that up to the workshop and cut all of the glass up there. I'm going to be using 600 gram BX to build up the laminate. I'm using BX because that is what I'm most easily going to be able to get to conform to all of these curves. The BX is going to get laid up over here, and I'm looking to have it extend out about 15 centimeters here, and then this edge out here is going to get staggered a little bit so I don't get any sharp stress risers. That of course means I'm going to have some seams up here. Now, to the best of my knowledge, this guy is of secondary importance because Athena has a fully encapsulated keel. The keel actually provides a lot of the same strength this guy does. But still, I'm going to lay up glass in the gap. I think something like this is going to be my first attempt at a template, but it's kind of difficult to imagine what is going to happen with all of the corners going on here. So yeah, let's just give it a go. I cut this sample up on deck and it is a little bit windy, so it kept flapping around on me, and Jesus, that is annoying. But let's go ahead and see how this fits. So far so good. Now I just need some kind of relief cut in here to be able to pull this top part over here without having a big bulge here in the middle. This is what I meant with it being difficult to figure out what would happen with all the corners, because see, this is about 15 centimeters too short, but over here, this flap is way too long. But with a slight modification, I think this could very well be the template for at least a couple of the layers I'm going to put down. There is a slight variation in the shape to these things, so I think the best approach here is going to be to cut the rough shape up at the workshop and then do the final bit of trimming while laying up the glass. Off camera, I've done a lot of fiddling with the fiberglass, but I think I've finally got something that works, and something where I'm not going to be wasting a lot of fiberglass. Up until now, I've been using some scrap 450 gram BX I had laying around, but this is the 600 gram, the stuff that I'm actually going to be using. Of course, the fiberglass is not going to lay flat up here because I still need to remove the last little bit of the cabin sole, but other than that, this looks pretty good. You might be concerned about this spot right here because that's where I'm going to be cutting open the other layers, but on top of the tops of these, there's going to go some 1000 gram UD. This stuff is crazy strong. It's going to go this way and also this way. As you can see, this 600 gram is pretty stable. That's going to be easy for me to cut up at the workshop and then bring down here. The UD, on the other hand, is very much alive and it wants to fray really bad. But wait, there is more, because while this guy does cover some of this, I'm still going to lay up some more glass, and that's where this longer square piece comes into the picture. I think this should work. I'm going to be aiming for 4 or 5 layers of the 600 gram covering everything, and then I think it is 3 layers of the UD. This is going to be incredibly strong. Welcome back to the workshop. I should be all set up to start cutting some glass up here, but before we get to that, feast your eyes on this. Yep, it is the return of the Dodger. If you've seen any of my recent videos, you'll know that I've been slaving over this thing for a few months, doing a lot of sanding and a lot of fairing and a lot more sanding and then finally some painting. But now this thing is finally done. She is very close to perfect. There are a few imperfections. I'd say she is a 10 on the spiffiness scale, and I'm very excited to put her back on the boat. But I am going to wait until I'm done dragging plywood in and out of the boat. In other workshop-related news, there is a fresh supply of pump, which is awesome because that means I can go ahead and make some new bushings for the rudder, or should I say remake some new bushings for the rudder. And then over there, I've set up an area for cutting glass. This is an almost intact roll of 600 gram BX. I think there is 60 kilos here, so that should be plenty. But let's go ahead and cut some fiberglass. There's not a lot to this. I've used a Sharpie to draw the shape I want, and I've also used the same Sharpie to mark the center line. That's going to make it a little bit easier for me to line everything up. I finished cutting all of the glass last night, and it took just about forever. And that has me kind of worried because if it takes this long to cut it, it's gonna take a lot longer to wet it out. The recommendation I got from the structural engineer was to add a little over 3 millimeters to the structural members. And to figure out how many layers that is, I laid up this. This is staggered so that this is 1 layer, 2 layers, 3 layers, 4 layers, and 5 layers. So if I check my little test here, I can see that I'll need 6 layers to get the appropriate thickness. And that is exactly what I've cut. I'm gonna leave the glass up here until I'm done with the last little bit of prep work. There's no reason for that to get covered in all of the fiberglass dust that's gonna be floating around. So let's head down to the boat and get the last bit of prep work taken care of. A short drive and a quick change of clothes later, I am now ready to get started. To be completely frank, I am very excited, let's say, to have this part of the project over with, meaning the prep work and reinforcing the structural members. The truly interesting bit is going to come later this summer. That's going to be all the rebuilding. For now, I just have to get through this phase, and unfortunately, it is going to take a bit of time to reinforce all of the structural members and put down the new cabin sole and move these 2 bulkheads. But we'll get there. And that takes care of the joyous last bit of prep work. All I have to do tomorrow is just to wipe everything down and I should be good to go. No doubt the most useful tool during this demolition phase has been this guy. He's in fact the cheapest tool I own, but despite of that, he is just chucking along. Of course, I don't know how long he's gonna keep doing that, but for now, this guy is awesome. I'm not quite at the stage yet where I'm gonna attempt to shave with this guy or do some kind of open heart surgery, but I am pleasantly surprised at how accurate this thing can be. You guys saw me cut the tabbing that secured the cabin sole to the hull. As you guys can see, there are no big gaping holes in the hull, at least not yet. I'm gonna run up to the workshop and get all of the stuff we need for tomorrow, but I'll see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Good morning, guys. I've got a question for you. How do you know when you live in a country that usually has a pretty shitty summer? When you, in the very end of May, need to use 205, which is the fast hardener, over 206, well, then you know for sure you live in a country that usually has a shitty summer. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, 206 will not cure below 15 degrees Celsius. And right now, the ambient temperature is somewhere around 12 degrees Celsius. So, yeah, fast hardener it is. I think there's one day next week where the temperature is supposed to peak at 15 degrees Celsius, but that doesn't really help me. So I am forced to use the fast hardener. Unfortunately, that also means a shorter pot life and working time. So I'm gonna keep the area I'm working on as small as I possibly can, and that means doing one of these at a time. But to be honest, that might actually be a good thing because I've got a feeling this is gonna take just about forever. Last night I popped the resin into my little insulated heating box here. That is gonna lower the viscosity. That means it's gonna be easier to pump, and it's also gonna be a little bit easier to wet out the glass. I think I've got everything I need lined up here. I've even got a fresh set of West Systems pumps. But there's something really annoying about this pump, but we'll get back to that in a few seconds. I've got plenty of paper cups. I've got the foam rollers I mentioned earlier, painting trays, fin rollers, stir sticks, a bit of acetone for cleaning tools, plenty of gloves, and of course my two types of glass. Back to these pumps and something that's been annoying me for a little bit. If you take a look at the top of this pump, there's a hole drilled in this lid where the pump kind of fits through, but that hole is way too big. Let me bring you guys a little bit closer. As you can hopefully see here, that hole is way too big. I think this is the third set of these pumps I've gotten where this is an issue. And it is an issue because if you're pumping resin that's cold and you're pushing hard on this, I've had this shoot down through the lid into the resin, which is a big mess. It's happened to me, and it's also happened to the cement boat people. So if you go to a store and you want to pick up some of these pumps, just check to make sure how big that hole is, because that can be annoying. The very first layer I want to put down is this UD, and like I mentioned earlier, this frays like nobody's business, so let's see how this goes. Wow, this stuff is horrible for fraying, and it is also not all that fun to wet out. This is painfully slow. I think I've found my new least favorite type of glass to wet out. That's 3 layers down and wet it out. It took about 40 minutes, so this is gonna take a bit of time. At least for now, I can move on to laying up the BX on this guy. That should be a little bit easier to work with. I've put down a very thin fillet of epoxy thickened with 406. I believe it would be better to not do that, but the surface down here is very rough, and I'd rather have a tiny bit of 406 there than voids. Getting this position correctly took about 10 minutes. If I'm shooting for 6 layers, that means I'm going to be spending an hour for each of these doing that. Yikes. God dang fiddlesticks, I don't know if this is actually gonna work out. I feel like I am really fighting this already. I've only got one frickin' layer on there. I've got a pretty good idea of what it is that's making this so much more difficult than it has to be, and that is the temperature. Because even though I am heating the resin, as soon as it hits the surface of the hull, it cools and it gets a lot thicker, and it's really difficult to wet out the glass properly. And also the fast hardener still gels pretty quick, so that doesn't help matter. So this is really a struggle. Not only is the laminate a right pain in the behind to wet out, the epoxy that's on my tools is also gelling a lot quicker, which means I have to clean them unless I want to use an obscene amount of these fin rollers. This is the 4th layer. We're slowly but steadily getting there. This is it, the final layer. For a little bit there, it felt like we would never get here. And that is the final layer done. Let's get some peel ply on this. That is the first one done. The bad news is there is 11 more left of those. It took about 5.5 hours to take care of that one. So the good news is I can do that after work. So that means I can do one every day or every other day, which means it shouldn't take that long to take care of the 11 of them. Then there's the matter of this long guy here, which is also going to take a bit of time. So yeah, it's going to be a while until I'm done with this. I guess I could hold off a little bit and see if the temperature improves. That would make it a lot easier to wet out the laminate, but there's no guarantee that's going to happen. This might very well be the summer we're going to get, so I might as well just forge ahead. I'm sure somebody's going to suggest using vacuum bagging or vacuum infusion to speed up the process, and speeding up the process would be amazing, but I don't think vacuum bagging or vacuum infusion is the answer. My first concern would be to get a good seal because the surface of the hull is quite rough. And then there's also the fact that these are cored and there are holes in them. That presents a couple of challenges. For one, a hole over here might cause a leak in this section, and also the core material, the plywood in there, is damp. That means if I put one of these under vacuum, a small amount of moisture is going to get drawn out. How much? I don't know. But I do know that, for instance, the epoxy I'm using here really despises getting wet when it's trying to cure. It gets all foamy and bubbly and weird. Although it does suck, I think my only real option here is just to keep plucking away at this and just lay up the laminate by hand. I find comfort in the fact that this is going to be a one-time thing. When I'm done, the foundation that I'm going to be building the rest of the interior on top of should be a-okay for decades to come. Before I can continue laying up more laminate, I need to swing by the workshop and pick up some more gloves. But I feel like you guys have seen enough laminating stuff for one video. Besides, I am only gonna get one more done this weekend, so that's not really super impressive. So I'm just gonna end this video here. Now on Monday, Ava arrives, so she's gonna be in next weekend's video. I have no idea what we're gonna be doing, but it's probably gonna be something fun. We'll see. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like. See you!